but then when the Colin Farrell character comes down to and he's still alive, but like fucked up. That's all I remember about that movie. But I do remember that it was a pretty good performance from both of them, and a good story, good script.
Yeah, nah, he's Colin Farrell, he's up there, man. He definitely did some really dope shit. I think it just like you said, he was in that Sam Worthington like kind of track as well, and then kind of broke out of it by doing the indies to kind of get him out of that space where Sam Worthington just got stuck, pigeonholed as like the white guy.
Well, then
the white action guy.
It became obvious that
Terminator.
He didn't have any acting chops, man. The dude was like didn't emote, like you didn't really. Like he was in the movie in Terminator with Christian Bale, and it's like Christian Bale is giving like a Christian Bale performance, and then
he's like,
and this guy's just like, yeah,
Terminator. Yo, that dude, I remember because Common is in that, and that's probably his worst role. That's saying something.
That movie was
so. It was a bad movie to begin with. But Common was so bad. Like he was like Busta Rhymes bad. Like, and then when I watched,
he was bad on his own merit. Like that was in that movie. Busta Rhymes at least would make you laugh at how bad he was. Common just made you sad for him because it's like, dude, like you should have tried a TV show first before.
Before I heard his other show. He was in another show, like some Western that was like at least a little bit better.
Silo, I watched it.
And then Silo, to his credit, he got better. Like I was like, he doesn't take me out of it, but he doesn't ruin it either. Like he's just there.
Gets better as a character actor over time. Even in Hell on Wheels, while there was a little bit of that early Common at first, by the time the show kind of like takes off, he's pretty decent in the role that he's in. And then Terminator, I don't hold against him just with all the fuck shit was going on in that movie. Like Terry Crews is in that movie for like 2 minutes and gets killed, and the camera holds on him to let us know that it's Terry Crews.
Dude, even the premise of it, like I didn't even know what was. I was watching that, I was like, what were they thinking? Like props to all the animation artists, all the motion guys, because they did their thing, like graphics wise, it was fucking dope. But like, what Mick G was just literally went way out of his depth. Like Mick G, keep him in this little box. Like, don't mix entertaining stuff.
Yeah, but he didn't give a shit. Like they just gave him a budget to do a Terminator movie, and he just went in because that was just like 2 hours of nothing.
I will say, circling back to Colin Farrell, he came on my radar when he had Phone Booth and
I remember that
Minority Report and and the Recruit. So I had to look it up because I was like, there was a movie. It wasn't necessarily good, but I just remember it was a big deal. I remember watching Phone Booth.
There's a lot of stuff in the early 2000s, like a lot of Hollywood, like big budget films. SWAT with Sam Jackson and
watch that.
He was in that. He was in he was in Daredevil. He was Bullseye, and actually he wasn't bad in that movie for what it was.
Yeah. He also was in. There was a movie I remember seeing, or not seeing, but like seeing the title, Heart's War. Like it was one of those movies. I'm gonna watch it. And I never came back to it. But now I saw that. I'm gonna watch it now.
I saw that because that was when there was a lot of war movies like that. Bruce Willis was in a couple of them because he was in Heart's War. I remember watching that.
Right.
And then he was in Tears of the Sun, right? I think he was in Tears Under. And so then there was the We Were Soldiers, which I liked. That was the Vietnam one with Mel Gibson. That was like right before he started going crazy, and he made what's Passion that Christ movie? Passion of the Christ, and that was literally I think the last movie he did before he started on Passion of the Christ. But yeah, that one was decent. But yeah, Hearts War, he was in that. I forgot about that. So see, he was in a lot of stuff. He was in a lot of stuff.
Early 2000s, he was in a lot of things.
Yeah. And then, but he, like now, you look at him as the Penguin, like you can barely recognize him. Not even just in, that's why I said, like, Americans are horrible at accents.
Yeah.
You pluck one of these Brits or Scottish motherfuckers, they do our accents like it's nothing.
Yeah. Well, you know what? With that, I'm gonna start it up. Welcome everybody to Blerdlines. This is your man Cam. With me as always is
your man Cam, aka Commando.
as well as
hey, it's the professor.
And we are back for another edition of Blerdlines. A couple things on it, but before we get into anything, big rest in peace and salutes to our man Tony Todd, who's institution and a staple in the horror genre and abound. Not only for Candyman, but like just for the stuff going. He's one of those like voice actor peoples as well. So like he had so many different layers that people had that would remember him from, or not remember him. They just remember him as that dude, that horror guy, or that whatever. But he was like a memorable person.
Yeah, he had one of the most iconic voices in voice acting, and then he was the Candyman, and that's what most people will probably remember him for being the Candyman, like Robert Englund to Freddy Krueger. He scared an entire generation of people.
100%.
But then there's all his work that he's done with DC, which as the voice actor of so many different DC characters, from Darkseid to Icon and several others, not to mention his work in Star Trek. For all of us Trek fans out there, he was a big time actor in The Next Generation, as well as most notably he played or portrayed I think it's Korg. Was it Korg? Worf's brother.
Oh yeah, you're right.
Yeah, in Deep Space Nine. Yeah.
Yep.
But also in that same series, but later and after that character had died, he also played future Jake Sisko.
So
he was all over. Yeah, he was all over Star Trek.
Jake Sisko. Oh, that's a Star Trek character.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Jake Sisko is the son of Captain Ben Sisko, who was the first Black Starfleet captain protagonist, if you will, on a Star Trek show. And so Jake was his son. There's an episode where they, of course, go and fast forward us to the future when Jake is an older man, and he's portrayed by Tony Todd, who again, at that point, most Star Trek fans would have recognized him from both that series as well as the one that that came before, the Next Generation. But even recently, the dude was Venom, the voice of Venom in Spider-Man 2, the video game. So,
also he was I would say he was also Zoom in the Flash. Flash, not a great show, but Zoom, really cool character.
Yeah, and they really made good use, to their credit, of his voice as Zoom. So yeah, Tony Todd, you can't say enough about him as an icon and as an artist in the world of TV and film and video games and all of that stuff. And yeah, it's sad to hear that he passed away, and I don't think he was even that old.
Yeah, he was in his, just to let me double check to make sure I get that right. He was 69. And so there was a post recently about a lot of the Black actors that had passed just this year alone. and a lot of them were in that range. Besides James Earl Jones, also rest in peace, but a lot of them were in that range of late 60s to early 70s. But yeah, he was definitely, like I said, definitely a big loss. And I think, like, you know, it's one of those things where people like you when someone passes, they're like, oh yeah, I remember that guy. Then you start to look at the laundry list of like roles. He's been acting since 1986, which is like wild. So but yeah, definitely wanted to make sure that we salute that man in the world of cinema. But also, speaking of cinema, we have a great black man, and now we go to the silly white guys with Quentin Tarantino's take on Dune.
Wait, what did he say?
So if you haven't, oh man! So if you haven't heard, Quentin Tarantino was basically popping off at the mouth like he normally does, because that's literally all he does these days instead of actually making movies. And he was just basically talking about Dune and how he was just kind of annoyed of all the like. He's like, I'm not gonna watch Dune because I don't watch remakes and I'm bored of it and blah 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 blah. D'Angelo has a more nuanced take. That's the overall.
Yeah, so I mean, I was gonna read his quote, but why bother? He basically said that, you know, he wasn't gonna watch the new Dune because David Lynch already made the film, and you know, they're all only doing remakes now. And he said, and he uses this as the same reason why he's not watching Shogun. So Denis Villeneuve, who made the new Dune films, responded, and you know, he basically said, you know, he really doesn't care about whether Quentin Tarantino watches his film or not. That's his prerogative. But he said he disagreed with what he was saying because he thought he was adapting the book into a film, which is different than a remake. Because he said, I agree, you know, I agree with you. There's too many remakes. I hate old recycled ideas, but what he was doing is different, and it's true. You know, it just, my thing is there more indicator that Quentin Tarantino is not that well read than him associating Dune with what Dennis V did as a remake of David Lynch's film? It's kind of a weird assertion in and of itself, and it shows a kind of lack of knowing or even a lack of understanding. Same thing with Shogun and the Hulu, and it also trivializes what those filmmakers achieved and what they did. They went right to the source and they adapted it. It isn't a remake of the previous filmmakers or show creators work.
Yeah, and I think that's the part where if you would have decided something different, like I think this would have been a non-thing. But the fact that he's like, I'm not watching Dune because it's a remake, as opposed to saying like, I'm not watching insert all these different remakes and sequels here.
Yeah, there's plenty of examples.
That are just...
Hold on, let's pause real quick because we have to clarify the definition of remake and an adaptation of something different, because it feels like even myself could get it confused. Like, what's the fundamental difference before we go further with the argument? Because I'm interpreting what you're saying, D, is that Quentin Tarantino just thought of this was just a David Lynch remake and not a readaptation of the book, right?
Well, I don't know if that's what he thought, but that's the way his statements come off. I mean, he doesn't specify that, oh, well, yeah, it's an adaptation of Frank Herbert's novel. He says that David Lynch already made the film, and then he follows that up with saying, yeah, because there are too many remakes and all of these, and he cites Shogun as well. So before moving on, I'll just give a definition, a loose definition. An adaptation is when you make a live action or animated or whatever piece of media that is taken from a different media source. So a book or a comic book or play, and you make that into a movie or a TV show, which is going back to the 80s when David Lynch released his film, is what he did. He took Frank Herbert's book and he made it into a live action film. Now he's the first to do it. Any person after that does the same thing is not remaking his film unless they specifically take the script that he used to film that movie and remakes it frame by frame with only a few things changed. What they're doing is they're taking Frank Herbert's book, just like David Lynch did, and they're adapting it. Different year, different production team, but adapting the same source. It's not a remake.
What would you consider a remake movie, for an example, so people can compare and contrast?
Halloween 2018 is sort of Halloween 2007. Rob Zombie's Halloween is a remake of the 1978 film. That's an example of a remake. There was a recent Poltergeist film that was a remake of the 1980s film. Yeah.
Would you say what is it? Night of the Living Dead falls in that category? Both
Night of the Living Dead, yes.
Yeah.
They aren't adapted from a book. They were original scripts, and and each time it's made adapting from George A. Romero's first script. Those are remakes.
Yeah, and they and also, like, go back from a film definition. A remake is a film, television series, video game, song, or a similar form of entertainment that is based upon and retells the story of an earlier production in the same medium. A remake tells the same story as the original, but uses a different set of cast, may use original actors, alter the theme, or change the flow of the setting. But in addition, since a remake is released sometime after the original work, it may incorporate new technologies, etc. But yeah,
let me ask you this question: would Batman fall into both adaptation and remake?
No, it would fall into
really?
adaptation. Yeah, what Christopher Nolan
that's a good point.
was not a remake of Tim Burton's films.
Yeah.
Okay, so that makes sense. Yeah, I wanted to establish that before we take this debate further.
Yeah. No, Batman is the source. Batman and his character, his world, his mythology originated as a part of DC Comics, the publication.
For reimagining.
Yeah. So I agree with both sides of it. Do we want to see remakes? No. So I agree with Tarantino, but I think his initial analysis of what Denis was trying to do is incorrect. Also, I agree with Denis. He shouldn't care what other people think, especially if he is doing an adaptation, right? It's his own idea of Frank Herbert's work, not who directed the first Dune again? Can you remind me of the name?
David Lynch. The first adaptation was
David Lynch. Yeah. So I agree with both of them. Yeah. But I think Tarantino's interpretation of why he didn't watch it was going in the wrong direction. So
his examples were bad. He was right on, but his examples were not good.
But I also agree with him because I was like, again, not understanding at that time the full meaning of what an adaptation of a remake. I was like, why do I need to see Dune? Like, there's so many versions of it. You know what I'm saying? I can fall into that category, right?
And only because I think that you're right. I think in that respect, I think Tarantino, he has a point. He just used the wrong examples. Like he could use a host of other ones that would have probably fallen into that are a lot better.
Yeah, but like I said, he's not wrong, but it's just the way that he's having the conversation is wrong.
Yeah, his theory could also lead into adaptations. Like I said, I don't need to see Batman's origin story 100 times. We already know what happens. Right? I don't care if it's adapted or remade. I know Batman's story. Let's move on, right? So there is a sentiment to Tarantino's argument, but at the end of the day, the way he presented it was just it had a lot of fallacies or like miscalculations on how he wanted to present it to us. But again, was he wrong? No, just a bad example. So I went to read his quote, and you're right. It did lead to a bad example, and it could come off as kind of hating, but again, he's an ill-informed hater.
Yeah, no, it came off for me not as he was hating, but as someone who, like you said, uninformed, who is not well read. Again, you use two examples that don't fit in the category that you're into the criticism that you're talking about. Like if you would use some other examples, and there are plenty of examples of remakes out there. You know, nowadays it was big in the decade from 2000 to 2010 and a little bit until 2015. Nowadays there are more what's called the sequel to the original, or the film that's set in the same world as that, than there are like straightforward remakes. So it's kind of redefined itself anyway. But his overall point of originality being what it is well taken. Like I said, he just uses a bad example to try to illustrate his point.
Yep, and yep, yeah. I think that's that thing. Also, speaking of adaptations, we all watched The Penguin, and we were just. I'm actually glad we did that definition from 1 to 1, because if you would have told me, say, 20 years ago, 2004, we out here chilling, we're all back in San Jose State reading comic books, that The Penguin would be the star of it, 1, his own TV show, 2, it'd be good, and 3, it'd have a dark dark and sinister tone of the overall show, and done really, really well. 4th, I would have been like, you're a liar.
And also, I'll add one more thing, and you continue to be interested even though Batman is only mentioned one time. At least so far, he's only been mentioned one time and hasn't been seen at all.
Yeah, and for someone like myself, who is not the biggest of Batman fan, I was like, hey, I'm okay with this. But think about Batman, his rogues gallery is one of the best in the biz. It's a lifelong comic book reader. He has the best rogues gallery of any superhero in comic books, period. He has a lot of shitty villains, but his top 20, top 25, they have all interesting layers that could easily be something that could be more. And I think this was a great example of taking a character that's typically comical or even cartoonish. In the books, they do a lot better in terms of making them a little bit more on the gangster level, which I think was good. But this was, to me, this was a great extension of Matt Reeves as the Batman, and it fit nicely in. It transitioned right out of the movie into the show. It established its own narrative, kept in the same flow and the same tone, and living in that world really, really nicely. And it gave all the you could tell that the actors, were really enjoying the script, and also Colin Farrell fucking acted the hell out of this.
Yeah, he did. He did pretty good. And I mean, you look at him and you hardly recognize that it's him, unless if you didn't know it was him, you wouldn't think it is. But yeah, really good origin story for Penguin, and something that, I'm always skeptical about these movies or TV shows that are focused that's set in the world of the superhero, but without the superhero, and about, some of their villains and all that stuff. But like you said, Batman has the more of a more interesting world and universe and supporting characters around him, and Penguin is a good example of the kind of different things you can do with all of those characters.
Let me add something. You mentioned, Cam, you're tired of Batman. You're tired of Batman now. If they'd have tried that, because we've seen so many stories of Batman. However, if you tried this in the Tim Burton era, right, I don't think we get this Penguin, because I don't think the world is ready for this type of story being told from the villain's perspective of real world. Like the Riddler was a serial killer, right? And the Batman with Robert Pattinson. I don't think in the 90s this would have passed.
Oh no.
Yeah. So it's kind of like, in hindsight analysis, it's like, all right, we weren't tired of Batman in 1990 because we've never really seen Batman like that, but we are now, because we've seen so many adaptations of it or remakes or whatever. But however, it has lended itself to open itself to a different outlook on how we view villains or how we view characters differently.
Well, that in itself is the nuance of the remake versus the adaptation, because what you're describing is the various ways in which you can adapt from the source material and have it work.
Yep.
And yes, you're right. In that era, it probably never would have worked. Just because the imagination of the audience and the people who were creating it had not reached that far yet. You know, we were just getting the Frank Miller and the Alan Moore and all of these types of stories where we were getting the darker versions of Batman and all of these characters. So no, the world would not have been where, I mean, Tim Burton's Batman had a little bit of a polarizing effect on it. In fact, in just a quick story, I'm pretty sure that's the reason why Joel Schumacher was brought in for Forever and why things changed, because they needed it to be more sellable for kids, because, you know, Tim Burton's was a little bit more edgy and darker, following that track of The Killing Joke and The Dark Knight Returns and all of that, and not the Silver Age stuff where it was a little bit more all about the puns and the dastardly, goofy comic book villains.
Yeah, definitely. And also the thing is, like, I'm not a Batman. I'm just not a Batman fan. It's the whole me and D talk about this all the time. But for Penguin, one of the things they've done in the last, I would say one of the things in the last 20 years in the comic books for Batman is they show the hubris of Batman and then they show the cunningness of his villains. And so it's been a kind of like a repeating theme where, like, some of the major events that have happened over the last 20 years in DC, a lot of them have been Batman's fault. Him thinking he's smarter than everybody else, fucking up, and then everyone having to figure out how to clean up his mess. And so it's been a kind of a reoccurring theme. And one of the things that I've been really impressed by a lot of the writers is they've been taking that Alan Moore kind of viewpoint of the villain and really deconstructing it. So all of that to say that this Penguin is from is on the backs of all those writers doing some good stuff, basically characters that were made in the 60s as these like cartoony types of things, and then giving them layers. And I thought, like, watching the Penguin, I was like, yo, this is really, really well done, to the point where you're like, yeah, like you said, Carolyn Farrell, unrecognizable, but also too the supporting cast from top to bottom is amazing. Everyone that has like a guest role that kind of pops in real quick of, you know, very familiar faces, and which I thought was awesome. Which, you know, didn't expect either, because I made sure I didn't read anyone else. I was just like, I just want to see who pops up, and I was like, oh shit, you know. I liked that a lot of the supporting cast was just as strong in the acting realm. And also got to give a special shout out to our man Vic. AKA the audience member of this show, because as he learned new things, you learn new things, and so you got to follow his journey as you're like, what the hell is going on? And then Vic would learn it. You're like, oh.
And that's very interesting. I'm glad you brought up Mr. Vic Aguilera. He is a very interesting character, and he was from the very moment that you meet him, because, you know, he's with the kids, so it's easy it's trying to steal Penguin's car. So it's easy to box him into, you know, sort of that category of punk kid, and you thinking he might bow up to Penguin, but like as soon as he comes up on him, he's like, you know, he shrinks and he becomes that kid. And you see this weird, unwitting mentorship form between the Penguin and Vic. Another thing I thought was good is just the way that these two sort of reflect the working class in a way that a perspective we didn't get fully. It was commented on, but we didn't get the full tilt deconstruction of it in the Batman, you know, which makes Penguin an interesting foil to this version of Batman. You know, he has to work and scratch and claw and manipulate his way to the power structure that he's in. And you didn't get that impression in the Batman. except to know that he was an enforcer and not someone that was completely in charge. But now you're seeing this sort of rise to power that he's undertaken. So yeah, it's in terms of the storytelling, it is surprising how quickly it pulls you in and makes you interested in what he's doing. And as I watch, there's never a time where as I watch, there's never a time where I felt, okay, where is Batman? Because I still have it in the back of my mind that, yeah, he got pretty messed up at the end of the Batman. So in these weeks that we're seeing in these episodes, it's fully believable that that dude is somewhere healing. And like he's only coming out a little bit at a time.
That's a great point, because I didn't. Again, I didn't. There's not one point where I was like, "Yeah, where is Batman?" But then you're right. Within the time frame that they put it in, it makes it makes logical sense in your brain where you're like, Batman just got fucked up. Things are just starting to rebuild, and we all know that Batman is still a human dude, so he takes time to like heal. So it's totally plausible within that realm of like as I said, like they set up in the pilot, right? Oh, it's a crime war. Everyone's trying to figure out who's in charge, blah blah blah. So it makes perfect sense within that realm. And even and we we're taping this on a Monday the 11th, and the series finale, season finale, just dropped the day before on the 10th. And so it is plausible that all this stuff can happen before Batman's kind of like, he's probably, and in true Batman nature, he's not noticing it. It's just that he has to act on it. And
Exactly.
That's how
Exactly.
So here's the thing. We are afforded an opportunity, again, based on the history of Batman films, to be afforded not to focus on a story about Batman. We are fortunate to now want to try to understand the characters that surround Batman in Gotham City and what makes them so interesting and how did they come to be who they are, right? And the Penguin is one alternative take, like we were talking offline about. The memory I have of Penguin is one of aristocracy and short man's complex coming up, but this is a different come up where he's more blue collarish, and how he was able to relate to Victor's character because he sees the same in him of wanting more.
The
Penguin
same
in this,
ambition, sorry, I
yeah,
just wanted to add to that. The same ambition remains, and the same quick to violence, and also insecurity about the way he looks. Those things remain. So that's the greatness of when you really nail an adaptation, when you can nail the spiritual aspects of the source material, but then modify it for the times that you live in.
facts. And so the parallels: Victor stutter, Penguin's limp. He sees the crippling effect on how it takes away his pride, his courage, and he sees how his parents have kind of blocked him. Where he at Penguins, the Carmine family, the parents blocking their kids and blocking him from reaching it because they don't see him nothing more than this, or they're reserved to a role in the hierarchy of things, right? And they
But
want more.
also, just to narrow in down to that example you just gave, in that parallel, Victor's parents accept their lot and what they have, whereas Oz's mother is pushing him towards. She's telling him, "You need to take over. You need to become a kingpin. You need to become a powerful player, and that's the man I raised you to be." So there's that irony as well.
Yeah, and we had some Sopranos comparison, but the thing about the Sopranos parents, they were just pure haters. Whereas Penguin's mom, she's delusional, but she snaps out of it to get her son back on track. That's when you see the real mom, the real her. And I can't forgive me for not thinking of her character's name.
Francis.
It's Francis Cobb, I believe. Yeah.
Francis Cobb. So Francis Cobb, she's in and out of being old and delusional, but then when she sees her son needs her, she steps up to the plate, gets him on the right path, right? The women in Gotham, kind of speaking of her and Sophia Carmine, are more powerful. Even oh my goodness,
Sophia Falcone.
No. The other lady that was from The Expanse.
Oh no, I was just
I mixed them up. Yeah, but
Sophia.
the three pivotal women are power players in this world currently.
Oh, you're talking about Nadia Maroney.
Nadia, yeah.
Yes,
So
yeah.
Because when her husband looks to her for advice, she tells him in Farsi, let's keep this going. She sees the bigger picture, whereas her husband sees the more intermediate game. So these women in Gotham, as the episodes progress, become more powerful, more confident. Now I don't want to go into spoilers because I've seen something that was crazy, but things do change, and their power players have moved position from men to women as we near the end of the season. But definitely a very good show. Definitely an adaptation that is palatable to today's viewer, opposed to the 90s and early 2000s, where we had different takes on Batman going back and forth. And I think, D, you're right. The Tim Burton Batman was so dark. That's why they brought in Schumacher to lighten it up. Whereas Tim Burton wanted to get away from that Adam West campy Batman and tell his take. So good point on that.
And it's funny because on rewatch, both Batman and Batman Returns, like they have a good solid place in like the superhero film, history. And rewatching it, like again, it just solid performances, a solid story, and it's an interesting and entertaining watch. After those two, it's a whole nother situation. But
and he also, Burton was trying to do something idiosyncratic to his style as an auteur, with the whole gothic, doubling down on the gothic nature of Batman's world. And see, that's another thing where you can literally zero in on certain aspects of his world and create something bigger. Because for the most part, that has always been there, with the exception of the Adam West campy version. The Bat Cave itself in Wayne Manor has gothic Edgar Allan Poe kind of vibes to it. Bruce Wayne as a figure is a very gothic type character, and that this darkness lives within him, and he lives in this mansion all by himself with Alfred, but pretty much by himself, no family and all of that stuff. In any other setting, he would be the perfect villain of a horror movie, but he just happens to be that villain or that horror figure for criminals in Gotham. But I think that's what makes it such a great world, and why, as a IP, DC relies so much on Batman and his world, because you can like, I was reading that apparently the next movie is going to be, they're making a big deal out of it because it's going to be the first Batman film that doesn't feature his name in the title. It's just going to be called The Brave and the Bold. This is, of course, the next DC, the first of the new DCU films that will include the character of Batman.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting because, like you were saying with the women in the story, all of them were, one, amazing. Two, the characters for them were good too, right? So even if they had trauma or anything like that, they still informed their overall character, and it wasn't defined by that. So, and shout out to Kristen Milotti that plays Sophia Falcone. One, who's a big nerd herself, which is hilarious, but also people remember her from How I Met Your Mother. She was the mother, essentially.
Yep, I forgot about that. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, and then but I was gonna say, like, all the and I'm gonna say Avasarala, but D, I know you can pronounce her name correctly. But who plays Nadia?
Oh, it's Shoray, and I'm probably still butchering it,
murdering.
But it's Shoray Agdashlu.
I'm gonna learn how to say that properly, because every time she turns up in any type of entertainment, it's always great. Like
she's amazing. She has such a presence about her that she commands the screen, and that's why she was perfect as Christian Avasarala in The Expanse, and she was perfect as the wife of Salvatore Maroni in this. and showing that, you know, she was a legit badass. Like she went into the fire with the men. Like she wasn't just a matriarch who you know, was at home. She was active. She was the head of the family de facto.
Yeah, definitely. And I think like the show, like I said, on all the points, right, from a narrative time to the tone, props to them on the score too. They kept that same kind of feeling from the movie into the show. So it had, like I said, it just blends perfectly and it's just seamless. And so I truly hope they keep with this type of theme of at least like giving this type of nuance to how they connect things together. This is Matt Reeves' kind of realm, which is, I think, is actually pretty dope. And I'm glad that they're kind of letting Batman kind of just be this thing in this type of context. Where now, when Gunn comes in with his Superman and everything else, that'll be another context. That'll be very, very interesting.
Yeah, that'll be Batman the superhero. Reeves is doing Batman the detective.
Yep.
So I want to add one more thing that I forgot to mention about this Penguin series is the fact that they do make cameos from the film, but very small. The police chief from the Batman is in there. Flyers of the mayor is in there without actually having the mayor. The only thing I didn't not like it because he did a good job, was Sophia Carmine's father. Was the actor was changed. Which I don't know why the original actor couldn't make a cameo appearance for whatever reason, but it's not a big deal. It works. But I wanted to note that they do bring in small little cameos from the Batman movie that doesn't like take over. Like we don't need to see Batman. We don't need to see these major players. We don't even need to see Joker in Arkham Asylum when they went in the flashback. They brought minor characters in just to give us another view of what the other players look like. And I appreciate that because, again, this was my big gripe with Mandalorian. We didn't need to see Luke, to know that Luke was in the universe, right? The cool thing that Josh had brought up previously is that a lot of the crime does happen at night, in the morning or around daytime, because they are still wary of that Batman is around. So I think those little nuance and aspects makes this show very interesting. And it's kind of like I didn't realize that. That makes this show even better. So that was my last part on that.
Yeah, I think you're right on that, and that you do. It's great world building, and if the Batman itself in Matt Reeves set up his world really nicely, and if you really go back and rewatch it, you can see that it's really, so when they start from where that one left off, it's a really, as I said offline, I said Disney, between Star Wars and Marvel, really should look at Penguin and take note. This is how you transition from the big to the small and keep it grounded and make sure that it always makes sense. It makes sense that Batman is not involved for many reasons. One, we did see him get pretty fucked up at the end at the end of the movie. Not only does he get shot a bunch of times and probably got cracked ribs and bruises, but he was electrocuted. And the only thing that saved him from dying completely is the armor that he's got on. And so he probably is going to reemerge, but by the time he reemerges, the Penguin will be the Penguin. He will be someone that he has to contend with. And I think that's the beauty of this story, is that as an intermediary chapter of the main story, the main saga of the Batman, it continues to hook you into the world, not just the characters, but the world. I love the scene where they show us the flashback of when Riddler destroys the water mains and floods the city. Here it is from the perspective of someone on the ground who, literally in the blink of an eye, watched his family get wiped out by all of that. And we know the players that were involved in trying to stop it and who did it, but the character Vic has no clue. He doesn't know what was going on in that moment, and it didn't matter. And I love those moments in world building. Is when you show the big and the small and how the big affects the small.
Hey, and one more note: there's no amount of push-ups and pull-ups that's gonna get Batman back on them streets.
Not in the time that this show is exactly. Not right now. That boy is laid up somewhere, and but you know what? The interesting thing is you still see his impact is because even when he's not there, they're still looking for him, and they're still cautious that he could pop up.
Yeah, and they he needs a back to tank that freaking Boba Fett had. But yeah, I like that. Like kind of what Cam said. Like they brought in the mayor. She was in there. She had a little cameo in there. They brought in so you just all of these little elements. And then the only thing that reminds me of this would be which is funny, was when Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. was on and Winter Soldier dropped, and then the next episode after it dropped was directly out of that movie. And they had a good seamless blend to it. And they did a really good job of really capitalizing on what just happened and then setting that tone for the rest of that season. Now, the rest of the show is whatever's, but that was one of those, that was another example where it's like they made it fit seamlessly in the world and it made sense. And so here are these agents dealing with what just happened on this global scale on a ground level. And that's what feels about this, where it's like you said, Batman is there, and he's probably healing up, but then in the meantime, while he's not around, we got to make some moves because
it's a true power vacuum, which is what from his own mouth he said was about to happen at the end of the Batman. He knows exactly what's going on, so it's like you brought up. It is possible that we'll see that he's been watching and monitoring what they're doing, but in the state that he's in, is he in the position to stop them right now? Probably not. Again, he has his home was destroyed. He's got to heal. Alfred is still in the hospital. He's still human. So, and I think that's what the grounded, when you ground those stories like this, and Batman lends itself to it, that's when you start to get these story paths where you don't get the questioning of, oh, well, why isn't Batman showing up? Well, they already did the work for that. What does he say at the very beginning of the movie? I can't be everywhere at once, but they know that I'm out there, and that sometimes is enough.
Nah, definitely. So as we wrap up, we'll do some final words. Nothing crazy, because I probably haven't thinking about it. I was trying to think of what was my own final words, which I forgot. But I'll go first. The trailer for Mission Impossible just dropped for the second part of it. Is one of those things where Tom Cruise, as we said on this show many times, the last white action hero that people actually care about just on a global scale, because when he drops something, people pay attention, whether you like him or not. And it's interesting where even the last Mission Impossible, again, entertaining. I no frills. I'm in it. I watch it. I can move on. It's almost refreshing that these types of movies can still get made in the sea of stuff that we have, which is kind of crazy because he actually still makes some entertaining type of value. And I'm curious to see if he can pull it off for this next one, even though I like Christopher McQuarrie anyways. At least he's a good director and writer to kind of helm this silliness. But at least, like I said, as long as it's entertaining to me and Tom's running in a movie, it's going to be a good movie. But yeah, that's my final word. Cam, what's yours?
Just to piggyback off yours, there is in the trailer. There's 3 scenes of him running, but again, I call Tom Cruise Mission Impossible movies the Pusha T of rap movies. Pusha T raps about drugs. He's been doing it for 20 years. We know what he's going to be rapping about, and we're okay with it because he raps pretty good. Same thing with Tom Cruise. He knows his action. He knows his genre. It's not anything highbrow or any whatever, but it's entertaining, and I'm okay with it. But my actual final word is just to read more. That's it.
Whoa, I don't even think I should say anything after that. I'm not going to give a final word. I'm going to allow that to be the final word.
Reading is fundamental, people. Reading is fundamental. All right. Well, this is Blerdlines. Thanks for rocking with us. And if you noticed, we're on video and whatnot. So follow us. We're on YouTube, Blerdlines podcast, as well as Instagram and Facebook. But yes, we'll be doing more video, be in your faces a lot more. You'll be seeing all of this a lot sooner than later. But yeah, other than
also
that,
see
we're
my
out.
lunch too. Peace.
Facts. Peace.